Dear people of God, today is the second Sunday of Lent, and Mother Church gives us three important readings for our reflection today. And I would like to reflect with you on the theme, divine motivation. In today's Gospel, we read about the events of the Transfiguration. That is Luke chapter 9, 28 to 36. Dear people of God, one good means of understanding the gospel text of this Sunday is to pay attention to the opening words of the first verse of the passage. And it reads, "And about 8 days after this saying," that is Luke chapter 9, verse 28. What sayings is Luke referring to here? The preceding passage of today's gospel text, that is Luke chapter 9, verse 21 to 27. We see Jesus announcing of his own suffering, death, and resurrection in Jerusalem. And we also recall in Mark's version of the same episode when Peter rebuked Jesus for saying such things. And this made Jesus also call Peter Satan. But Jesus does not stop at speaking about his own suffering, death, and resurrection. He tells the disciples that taking up their own crosses every day and following him was a condition for being his followers. In other words, each of them would also have their own share of the suffering and challenging times. And this did not sit well with the disciples. This is surely not good news for men who had been around a man they believed would soon become a king. And they were all low in spirit. So Jesus decides to do something. Jesus decides to motivate them. Jesus decides to give them a motivation that will enable them to stay focused on attaining the ultimate goal in the end. And this is the reason for the event of the Transfiguration in the gospel text for today. Dear people of God, the Transfiguration is the assurance of what the future glory would be like. At the Transfiguration, the apostles became aware that suffering, pain, and disappointment did not have the final word. The cross which both they and Jesus would endure would eventually open up into the glory of his resurrection. And so at the Transfiguration, the disciples saw who Jesus really was, the Son of God. They saw that glory. They heard the voice, and this put their doubts and fears to rest because they were with the right person, the Son of God. It is same with today's first reading. After God calling Abraham from his own home country in Genesis chapter 12 and promising him land and offspring, after many years, Abraham did not have any child of his own. Dear friends, humanly speaking, Abraham and his wife Sarah became old, and this was very challenging for him. And so in today's first reading, we hear Abraham complaining to God that he had no child. In a way, Abraham is doubting the promise that God made to him. And so God repeated the promise, and to motivate and encourage Abraham, God takes him outside at night when he could see the stars. Dear friends, it was in the darkest that Abraham was able to see the stars. What can we learn from this? God's grace shines out most powerfully in our lives during our darkest moments. And so, dear people of God, today God is motivating all of us in our journey of life. God does not leave us unmotivated, and God does not leave us without incentives that are meant to reassure us of His presence as we journey on through life. Life can sometimes get scary, even as the future gets even more uncertain. Sometimes we question our faith and ask if God actually cares about us. Dear friends, at such moments, the Lord wants us to go outside and look at the stars to draw more strength to continue to move on. Faith does not forbid questioning, but it certainly calls on us to believe God's answers to our questions. St. Paul, in today's second reading, advises us not to live as enemies of the cross of Christ. Philippians chapter 3, verse 17. And St. James also tells us to be grateful when all sorts of trials come our way, for by means of them we are all trained to become mature Christians. James chapter 1, verse 12. This is by no means easy, and that is the reason why God periodically sends us motivations, consolations, and hope. Our God is faithful, and He will reward our perseverance. May God bless us all. Amen.